We all sweat. It's totally normal, right? It's how our bodies work. But what if it just never stopped? Today, we're going to talk about hyperhidrosis. And this is a condition that's so much more than just a physical thing. We're going to get into the hidden psychological side of it and see how it can turn everyday life into this constant source of anxiety, really shaping how people see themselves and, deal with the world around them. And this quote, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it. A simple handshake is torture. For someone with hyperhidrosis, that's not being dramatic. That's just daily reality. I mean, think about it for a second. A basic, simple gesture of greeting suddenly becomes this moment you're absolutely dreading. This really, really captures the emotional weight we're talking about here.
And look, these aren't just little annoyances. These are daily nightmares that just pile on top of each other. The anxiety isn't just about, oh, I have a stained shirt. It's the fear of being judged for it. It's not just about a smudged piece of paper. It's the absolute frustration of feeling like your own body is sabotaging you. All these constant little roadblocks just transform normal life, and they lead people to pull back from the most basic human things, like giving someone a hug or even just using a keyboard next to a coworker.
So what happens? Well, all this constant fear and avoidance leads to what one psychologist calls a self-imposed quarantine. People start to withdraw. They isolate themselves, almost as if they have something contagious. And you can see how this can easily spiral into a social phobia, completely crush your self-esteem, and even lead to serious depression. Now, imagine this whole thing starting during your teenage years, a time that's all about social connection. The impact on who you become can be just devastating. So what is actually going on inside the body? To really understand how to fix this, we've got to decode the science first. And it's so important to remember, this isn't some kind of personal flaw. It's a real, legitimate medical condition. So let's break down what's happening. Okay, so at its very core, hyperhidrosis is basically your body's sweat glands just going into overdrive. We all have somewhere between 2 and 5 million of these little guys, these eccrine glands, to keep our temperature in check. But with hyperhidrosis, they get hyperactive. They start pumping out way, way more sweat than the body actually needs to cool down. Now, this is a really, really important distinction. Doctors split excessive sweating into two main types because the cause totally changes the treatment plan. You've got primary hyperhidrosis, where the excessive sweating is the condition. It's often genetic, it's in specific spots, and here's a weird clue. It usually stops when you're asleep. Then you have secondary hyperhidrosis, which is different. It's a symptom of something else going on, and figuring out which one it is, that's the critical first step. And wow, when you look at the potential causes for that secondary type, the list is huge. It could be anything from a hormone issue like hyperthyroidism to an infection or even a side effect from a medication you're on. This is exactly why a doctor can't just look at the sweating itself. They have to play detective and figure out if it's a red flag for something else. So how do doctors get to the bottom of it all? Well, the path to a diagnosis is really a process of elimination, and getting it right is, of course, the first real step toward finding some relief. Here's the thing. There's no single blood test for primary hyperhidrosis. The diagnosis really comes down to your story. A doctor is going to start by asking a ton of detailed questions and doing a physical exam. But then, and this is the key part, they'll run tests for things like your thyroid or blood sugar. And they're not doing this to find hyperhidrosis. They're doing it to methodically rule out all those other secondary causes first. Now, to get a more objective look, doctors sometimes use this really clever and honestly surprisingly simple test. It's called the minor starch iodine test. They literally just paint the area with an iodine solution, let it dry, and then sprinkle on some starch. And wherever the person sweats, the moisture causes a chemical reaction that turns this deep, dark purple-black. It basically creates a live map of the problem, showing exactly where the sweat glands are working overtime. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem. Now for the most important part, right? What can you actually do about it? Well, the approach to treatment is usually thought of as a ladder of interventions. You start with the simplest, easiest things, and then you climb up to more serious solutions if you need to. So the first rung on that ladder is all about topicals and lifestyle. This kicks off with things like prescription-strength antiperspirants and simple swaps, like wearing more breathable clothes. Then there's this procedure called iontophoresis. Basically, you put your hands or feet in a shallow tray of water while a really mild electrical current passes through it. It sounds a little strange, I know, but it can be super effective at temporarily telling those overactive sweat glands to just chill out.
Now, if those first steps just aren't cutting it, the next rung up the ladder is often botulinum toxin. Yep, better known as Botox. And it's not just for wrinkles. When it's injected into the skin in areas like the underarms, it works by blocking the nerve signals that tell the sweat glands to turn on. It works really, really well, but it is temporary. The relief usually lasts for about 3 to 6 months, and then it has to be done again.
And at the very top of the ladder, for the most severe, life-altering cases, there's a surgical option. It's called endoscopic thoracic sympathectomy, or just ETS for short. It's a minimally invasive procedure where a surgeon makes tiny incisions to go in and find the sympathetic nerve chain. You can think of that chain as the main command line that's sending out all those sweat signals. They then cut or clamp that nerve to permanently interrupt the message. But, and this is a really big but, while ETS can be a permanent solution for that one area, it's a major decision with some pretty significant risks. The most common side effect by far is something called compensatory sweating. So the body can't sweat from the hands or underarms anymore, so it compensates by sweating way more somewhere else, like your back or your chest. For most people, it's mild, but for a small percentage, it can be just as bad as the original problem. Because of trade-offs like that, surgery is almost always the absolute last resort. And that brings us to a final thought. We've looked at the science, the diagnoses, the treatments, everything from a cream all the way up to surgery. But with hyperhidrosis, the impact is never just skin deep. It just shines a massive spotlight on that deep, deep connection between our physical bodies and our mental well-being. So when a physical condition has the power to literally build walls around you, it really makes you wonder, where does true healing begin? Is it with treating the body, or is it with rebuilding the confidence that got lost along the way?